закон! Вето на закон!
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to our weekly show, Cold War 2.0, with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. Today is the 15th episode. And this show, Tarik, how are you doing, my friend?
Fine, how are you, Kevork?
Good. I didn't expect and anticipate that I would see such protests. And today we're going to discuss the protests in Ukraine. Are they grassroots? Are they supported from regional or outside powers? However, before that, I would like to thank all the viewers of Syriana Analysis, those who are watching us on YouTube, on Rumble, on Ganjin World, and special thanks to our friend Red Access for moderating the live chat. And for those who are asking, this is in Kiev, and those are protests against I was going to say the Jolani regime, but I think this is the same. It's the same handler, probably. And before we jump into today's discussion, guys, I would like to mention that our dear friend Tarik is offering the new subscribers on Substack a limited time special discount. Today is the 25th and tomorrow is the 26th of July. 2025. For those who are watching, the link is in the description below. You can simply click and follow. When we reach to the mid of this conversation, when more hundreds of people join, I will again do this announcement. Tarik, different. I want to, of course, focus today on what is going on in Ukraine, and I have picked 3 articles for that. One of which I have read today from the Times. The title says, "Why are Ukrainians protesting against Zelensky? The unrest explained." And I just highlighted the first paragraph saying that Zelensky's decision to strip Ukrainian anti-corruption organizations of their independence is arguably the biggest gamble of his political life, and one that threatens to tarnish his image in the West, where he has been hailed as a hero for resisting Russia's invasion. Am I naive to think that this is probably not really the case, and why all of a sudden this protest erupted against him and there is a coverage? Is it really only about the corruption issue? What is going on with these corruption organizations? Were they going to come after him? Could you please explain to us, for those who haven't followed the situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, I think there are really several layers to unpack here. One is that the corruption issue and the anti-corruption slogans of these demonstrations, and I've just seen them, we've seen them, we can talk about them a little more, but they're all about this particular problem. That's just the surface. Or you could also say that the corruption issue is the trigger. As a trigger, it has a certain genuine force, but it's not the main or the only issue that people are angry with in Ukraine, and angry in particular with Zelensky and his administration, and also very specific people in his administration who are very powerful around him. So his popularity rating is still officially fairly high, but it has declined now for years, and it is still declining. And of course, you also have to be careful with these ratings in general, because Ukraine is not at all a democracy, and it is a society in which, and this is just a fact, this is not Russian propaganda, this is the reality, in which you have to be afraid, very afraid, if you go against either what the government wants you to think, or especially what the government wants you to say. Ukraine has been streamlined very much under Zelensky. It's a very oppressive place now. And that brings me to something else, which is, the Times, the sentence you just read, it makes it sound as if Zelensky's image can be tarnished only now. That is complete nonsense. People really need to understand that Zelensky was showing very serious authoritarian tendencies long before the major escalation of the war that, as you remember, happened in February 22. Why am I stressing this? Because the causality is not the war. Zelensky has not become an authoritarian because of the war. I wrote an article about his authoritarian tendencies in 2021 already, and I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only one, because what was I writing about? I was writing about in 2021 what a lot of Ukrainians were saying. Ukrainians, the Ukrainian media then were not as much under control as they are now. And they attacked Zelensky massively. A lot of the people who completely shut up once the war escalated, right? They closed ranks. But before that, in 2021, if you go back to this, if you know Ukrainian and Russian, if you look at their media, there was a wave of massive criticism of Zelensky for building de facto an authoritarian regime. The Ukrainian term used at the time was monovlada, which means mono power. But what they really meant was an authoritarian regime built around him personally and his party, right? Which is basically a political machine. This goes back a long, long time before the war. So I've seen this also with Ukrainian outlets like Ukrainska Pravda now. I've seen it in Western outlets. There is this narrative that is being spread that, oh my God, Zelensky has turned authoritarian. No, he has not turned authoritarian. He has been authoritarian for years, and the West has supported an authoritarian leader for years already. So the real question is, why do they suddenly have had enough, right? And I think there are two levels here. One is, in the West, there really are people who are worried about what he did with this special law against the anti-corruption agencies, which he was basically trying to subject to his control, right? But they're not worried because they really want to fight corruption in Ukraine. Don't be silly. They're worried because the anti-corruption agencies in Ukraine are well known for being particularly strongly influenced by the West. They're basically sort of Trojan horses of the West. There may be other things as well, but that is one of their functions and has always been. Zelensky was shutting them down because he is trying to reinsure himself against the West playing a dirty trick on him. The irony is that by that, he actually triggered a Western response, right? So what has he done in response to that crisis? He has backpedaled rapidly. So the basic story here is he ran a campaign against these two anti-corruption agencies, NABU and SAP. Those are acronyms or abbreviations, actually. People got arrested. There were police raids in their offices, all very aggressive, right? Then the parliament, which is of course dominated by his political machine, passed a law submitting these two agencies basically to him, right? And depriving them of whatever autonomy they had and whatever potential they had to threaten him and his friends.
Yep.
Then you had the protests, and you had the EU complaining, so OSCE complaining, several very powerful Western information war outlets such as The Economist and the Financial Times and The Spectator all suddenly went after him. Deutsche Welle too. It was a real campaign, like a memo was sent out, right?
Yes.
Fuss. Zelensky, there's a contract out on Zelensky now. That's how it works. And now he has backpedaled and he has said he's going to submit a new law, right? So we don't know exactly where this will end, but this is definitely not simply a story about corruption. This is a story about geopolitics and about the interaction between Zelensky and the West. And it's a story about a project of building a Zelensky authoritarian regime that has been ongoing for years. I would say since 2020, actually.
Yep. I will show this video that you said he backtracked it, right? And this is the translated video, basically, just for us to take a look what he says here.
Вже сьогодні є у Верховній Раді України мій законопроект, те, що обіцяв для справедливості, для правоохоронних і антикорупційних органів, повноцінні гарантії незалежності антикорупційних, реальні можливості перевірити, щоб не було жодного російського втручання. Кожен, хто має доступ до державної таємниці. Це не тільки в НАБУ і САП, але й ДБР, наша національна поліція, має пройти перевірки на детекторі брехні. І це мають бути регулярні перевірки. Є також в законопроекті норми, які убезпечують від різних зловживань. Текст законопроекту обговорювали і з партнерами, і з правоохоронцями, і з представниками НАБУ і САП. Багато пропозицій від наших партнерів, щоб долучитись європейські експерти, Британія, Німеччина, Євросоюз. Доручив нашим урядовцям представити законопроект всім нашим партнерам і залучити всі необхідні експертні можливості. Звісно, важливо, що українці так достойно реагують на всі події. Україна – це люди, які не байдужі. Я дякую всім, хто воює заради нашої держави, хто працює заради України. Дякую.
He's not even funny anymore. He's not even funny anymore. Look, I mean, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead. I wanted to ask something non-political first. Please go ahead, because you also understand Ukrainian. And
I mean, he mentioned one thing I forgot to mention because it's completely unreal, right? Which is that one lie that his regime has used to go after these anti-corruption bodies is to say that they are now also shot through with subverted by Russian intelligence agents, right? That's, of course, total nonsense. It's actually the other way around. What he's afraid of is Western influence in these agencies because he has to recalibrate his relationship with the West. So the West, one should add one thing. But from what I have seen, it is true that the two anti-corruption agencies that he targeted very brutally initially have officially welcomed his U-turn. So they basically seem to have said, okay, if you pass a new law and correct your mistakes, we let bygones be bygones. But here's the thing. They couldn't do anything else. Obviously not. What else are they supposed to say? And from what else I've seen out of Ukraine, Ukrainians do not believe Zelensky. This little speech that he gave where he basically says, trust me, it's okay now. They are not believing him and they have every reason. Zelensky is an extremely cunning and extremely ruthless operator. And what is worse, he's surrounded by them. And one of the worst, of course, is this infamous chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, who probably very, very likely has his fingers in this affair as well. So it's not as if he can just repair that. I don't think so. And we should mention one more thing, which I have also not mentioned yet. One reason why people are very unhappy with him as well, of course, and they can't say it because they would immediately be punished brutally, is that they're not happy with the war. They're not happy with the war. They're not happy with the massive forced mobilization drives, which are very brutal. They're not happy with the fact that the war is being lost.
Yep.
We know this because the Russians recently, for a week or so, have launched a systematic campaign of air attacks on the Ukrainian recruitment centers. Those are basically bureaucratic buildings, offices, right? And we know that a lot of Ukrainians, and this is genuine, this has been confirmed, have welcomed these Russian attacks specifically on social media, essentially saying, yeah, Russia, go, we hate these bastards too. And they have every reason to hate them because those are the people who drive around in minibuses and by the most brutal means, beating them up like hell, catch people to then induct them into the army as cannon fodder. Of course, all of these things play a role here too.
They're mounting pressure on him. I've watched today a video of a Ukrainian journalist whom I've seen a few videos of her. She has been very vocal critic of Zelensky for a long time, and she posted this. I just want to show this video for us.
Friend, Zelensky doesn't respect anyone, not us Ukrainians, not you Americans, not Europeans. He doesn't care what you think. You are paying him from your own pockets, and he's stealing your money. What happens in Ukraine decides whether a big war will start in Europe. But Zelensky wants to keep spending your money and stop you from even checking how it's used. He's destroying the anti-corruption agencies you created with your money, $500 million. Here's what I want to say to people in the US and EU. You might not like what I'm about to say, but it's truth. He doesn't respect you, not the citizens of the US, the EU, or the UK. He thinks you're fools. You sent money to help Ukrainians, and he steals it. He's already one of the richest people in the world. He doesn't respect us, his own people, and he doesn't respect your support. How do we change this? Only one way: audit Ukraine. That's exactly what Zelensky is afraid of. That's why he destroyed NABU, the anti-corruption agency. Demand the audit in the media, in the comments. Let's pressure on your politicians. Together, they're the only one way to save us, and you, and the whole world.
When you follow Zelensky's speeches and his political behavior, for example, you say he has autocratic tendencies, right? Where do you think this comes from? Like, is it in his personal character? Is it in the ambition? Is it in the political ambition or personal ambition? How do you assess, like, when you watch Zelensky, somebody who came from acting, entertainment, comedian, into ascending into the head of a state, and then a war erupts, and then he is the leader. He is the new, what did they call him? The new Churchill back then? I don't remember. Like, they compared him to historical figures, right? Yeah. What makes a person to be so detrimental, to be involved in such a war and continue till the end, although the realities on the ground show otherwise? Is this personal for him? What's happening?
Look, I don't know, how Zelensky became the particular individual he is in psychological terms. There are people who speculate that when he was very young, that he grew up in a relatively rough city and in a rough part of a rough industrial city, Kryvyi Rih. And when he was very young, there are people who speculate that he was one of the kids being beaten up, not one of the kids doing the beating. That's the thing that some people claim. If it was so, it may have played a role. But consider that, a lot of people are subject to similar very nasty experiences as kids, and they don't turn into ruthless dictators, leading proxy wars for the US. There's no necessary connection. Now, you also have to see that then, when he was a young man, he made his career by being an extremely, how shall I say, adaptable comedian. If you look at his comedy, at much of it, not all of it, but much of it, is extremely primitive. And I'm not saying that as a snob. It's okay, we have different sort of tastes. But what it tells me about him is that he was somebody who was, first of all, interested in hitting the right buttons with an audience, right? And he found his audience in this niche where, you had to pretend to play the piano with your penis. This is one of his famous acts back then, right? Or infamous acts. And he exploited that to the full, right? It wasn't everything he did wasn't like that, but a lot of what he did was like that. And a lot of people in the West don't know this. So that tells me he was an extremely opportunistic character, right? Somebody who would do anything just to get there. At this point, he was also really a protege, I would say a pet protege of one of Ukraine's worst oligarchs, Ihor Kolomoisky. By now, Kolomoisky has been shunted aside and even purged. That's a different story. But when Zelensky was young and up and coming, and not yet the Zelensky in politics, Ihor Kolomoisky was his mentor in many ways. And Ihor Kolomoisky is an extremely criminal, ruthless figure as well. So that tells you something again about the man before he even entered politics. And then there's a structural factor. Let's not forget that the way that political environments actually work also influences the characters who enter them. And when Zelensky took over the presidency, the Ukrainian presidency is a very strong office. It's not at all like the German presidency, which is basically ritualistic and representative. The Ukrainian presidency is much more like the American presidency inside the state. It's a very powerful office. And moreover, Ukraine has, since independence, right, since 1991, and again, I'm not saying this with irony or with a lack of respect, but I think many Ukrainians would agree with me that Ukraine has an uninterrupted history of authoritarian tendencies among its rulers, and I wouldn't exclude a single one, not a single one since then, and massive corruption, and a type of politics that is particularly raw in the sense of everybody understands that ideological statements and statements about political aims and values are just a facade. And what it's really about is material gain and amassing power so that you can get even more material gain. And Zelensky is no rupture with this. He's simply no rupture. He sold himself. This was a little bit like Obama during his first election campaign, right? Change you can believe in. And then when Obama comes into office, of course, he's just like the others and even worse. In a way, Trump is a similar figure, right? He also promised people radical change, drain the swamp and all that. And of course, Trump is very much in continuity with all the usual sins of the American political system. And something very similar happened in 2019 during Zelensky's breakthrough campaign. He promised people massive change. And if he has changed anything, then that he has made everything much worse. The war with Russia has horribly escalated, although the one big promise he gave them is that he would end the war. And also, the always very fractious, tendentially authoritarian policies of Ukraine have gotten worse. He has established, I would say, the most authoritarian system ever in post-independence Ukraine. And I'm including Yanukovych. I'm including the infamous Yanukovych here. Not that I liked Yanukovych. I hated his guts. But the point is, Yanukovych didn't get so far. Why didn't Yanukovych get so far before he fell? Because Yanukovych didn't have Western allies. Zelensky is the first Ukrainian president who has gotten massive support from the West to build his authoritarian system. That is the true story here.
One of our friends say, and I'm going to ask you this with caution, that one of the reasons or the reason why he has these authoritarian traits is because he is from a similar or the same tribe of Benjamin Netanyahu.
I don't think so. Look, I mean, this is an illusion. Obviously, let's spell it out, right? Not we, but the person who asked is alluding to the fact that Zelensky is of Jewish descent. That's no secret, has never been a secret. In fact, Zelensky has used it to an extent to gather political capital in Ukraine and in the West. But that's not the reason at all. You know, Netanyahu, if you want to compare, Netanyahu is an absolute psychopath, a murderous psychopath, and he is an inherent to fascist genocidal ideology, which is Zionism. That's the issue with Netanyahu. I don't think Zelensky is a
Has
murderous
Zelensky ever
psychopath.
Has Zelensky ever said if he is a Zionist or not? He never said that,
No,
right? Like,
no,
he never
not to my
publicly said.
knowledge. But he has said other things. You know, so let's go away from the ethnicity. Let's look at the politics, like something like Zionism or Israel as a model. Now there you get a connection, because Zelensky has said on various occasions that one of his examples for what Ukraine could be like is Israel. I'm not kidding. And of course, Zelensky doesn't mean by that Ukraine would become a majority Jewish state. No, that's not what he meant. What he meant is he sees Israel as an example of an extremely militarily powerful and fairly actually repressive state, and he admires that. So at the political level, you get some sort of a link, because Zelensky sees the link. It's not the genes. Come on, I'm sorry, but honestly.
This is the statement that our friend Tarik is referring to. Zelensky wants Ukraine to be a big Israel. Here is a roadmap.
Yeah.
And this is on the Atlantic Council, basically, on NATO's mouthpiece.
Yes.
Tarik, so many articles written this week against Zelensky. This one is in the Telegraph. For Ukraine's sake, Zelensky must now step aside. Zelensky was once Ukraine's savior. In the first hours of the Russian invasion, as Putin's paratroopers advanced on central Kiev with specific order to kill him, Zelensky refused to evacuate. Instead, he rallied his people to a heroic resistance that surprised the world. And Ukrainians themselves. Yeah,
I'm sorry, but Owen Matthews sometimes is a smart guy. I have much more respect for him than for many others in the West. But the story about the Russians actually trying to assassinate Zelensky, it's not true. It was the opposite. They were trying to basically take the center of Kiev rapidly. That's true. But the attempt was not to assassinate Zelensky. The only reason Zelensky came out of the bunker is that the Russians sent him a message that we are not after you personally. That's what really happened.
And he says it was thanks to Zelensky's relentless lobbying and inspiring showmanship that Western nations were cajoled into sending rockets, artillery, and tanks, where once they had offered helmets and bandages. But those times are gone. Zelensky is no longer part of the solution to Ukraine. He is part of the problem. When we read all these articles in 1 week, so many of them in 1 week, you said as if a memo has been sent.
Yes, definitely.
But what does this tell about the journalists and the press? Like, all of a sudden, everybody turns against Zelensky, like
yeah, altogether. Chris Miller. Now, I have to make a bit of an exception, to be honest, for Owen Matthews, the guy who's just been reading about, because he's at the Spectator. I think he's an editor there as well. And if you look at the Spectator, which in some other ways I can't stand, on Ukraine, it has been a slightly more realistic magazine than many other Western media, actually. So they have a bit of a record of at least trying not to be totally captured by the insanity, of Zelensky cult and all that. So I give them that. But if you look at the effect as a whole, Deutsche Welle, Financial Times, The Economist, definitely very, very important, putting the boot in with a terrible picture. The Economist basically made Zelensky look like Saddam Hussein. And I'm not saying anything about Saddam Hussein here. I'm telling you that they are trying to make him look like somebody we already eliminated. And there's a reason for that, right? Deutsche Welle, I've mentioned already, who I forgot, this was the Telegraph, and I'm forgetting stuff. So what does it tell you about the journalists? It tells you that in one way or the other, they can be made to follow a campaign, because this can't be an accident. Now, I'm not saying, because I'm not there, I'm not saying that somebody comes to them or gives them a phone call or sends them an email and says, you write this now, right? But it is interesting that probably in some editorial meeting or at some editorial office, they're being told, hey, aren't you interested in something like that, or along those lines, right? So yeah, it's a pattern. It's definitely a pattern, and I don't think it's spontaneous. No.
Look, the Telegraph. For Ukraine's sake, Zelensky must now step aside. Economist. Zelensky has made a strategic blunder. Washington Post. Ukrainians remind Zelensky what democracy looks like.
Exactly.
Zelensky signals retreat from power grab after mass protests in Ukraine.
And you know what else tells you something about this whole campaign? And that's a very important feature. If any of these journalists were honest, if they were genuinely driven by this argument, right? And it was their own individual concern to investigate where Zelensky is now, what he's doing, what happened there, then you would see them talking about the fact that the West has supported him for years, while his authoritarianism has also been going on for years. But no one mentions that. And it's actually very hard not to mention that, to overlook this fact. So this big blind spot that they all share, that tells me something else about this being a campaign. Yes.
It is a campaign. It's quite obvious it's a campaign, and it's quite obvious that there are powerful circles who wanted for this campaign to add pressure
Seymour
on him.
Hirsch, of
Seymour
course.
Hirsch,
Now,
yeah.
let me say one thing before people misunderstand me. I have great respect for Seymour Hirsch, right? So I'm not saying he's part of the campaign. No. I'm not saying that. He's not the type. But it's interesting that exactly at the same time, sources in the White House leaked to Seymour Hirsch that people in the White House have had enough of Zelensky, to the extent that they are considering him being gotten out of power, as they put it, quotation marks, feet first, if necessary. Right? So Seymour Hirsch was told this. I believe him. He's not part of a campaign, and he's just reporting what he has been told by his sources. But the fact that this has been done now, that is part of the campaign.
True. We're in the mid of this conversation. I just want to remind everyone, guys, that we do this weekly with our dear friend Tarik Cyril Amar. This show is called Cold War 2.0. And we do 1 hour conversation about the current affairs in Europe, Russia, China, basically multipolarity, unipolarity. And we're trying to focus today on the Ukraine case, especially after this consistent, let's say, and organized media campaign against Zelensky itself. I would like to kindly ask those who are watching and those who like these contents, 3 out of 10 people watch this content do not hit a like button or subscribe to this YouTube channel. I would be very happy and grateful if you simply just hit the like button while you're watching it. And it really helps this channel grow, and this show reaches to more people. And our dear friend is offering new subscribers a limited time special discount on Substack today on the 25th and tomorrow on the 26th of July. The link is scrolling on the screen, and you have also the link is in the description below. Tarik, you published an article this week. It's called End Game for a Pawn with a question mark. I would like to give you the floor to answer to that question mark, because it's a big question, to be honest with you. And the answer for it could depend on several factors. But this could be the beginning, let's say.
Could be. It's, I have to say what a lot of people say in my situation. I can't be original. I don't have a crystal ball, right? So I can observe certain patterns that are unfolding now, and then I can guess a little bit as to the immediate future. But that's about it. But here are my guesses. What is clear to me is that Zelensky has lost a lot of Western support, especially American support. It's very important to once again stress something that I think some people overlook. The fact that the Trump administration has to some extent turned against Russia does not mean that they have turned in favor of Zelensky. These are two separate issues. The current situation is that the Trump administration has to some extent turned against Russia, and they still hate Zelensky. Yep. That is what's really going on. Now, the question is, what happens in that situation? Zelensky clearly can see that he is in serious danger. I think he's in political danger, as in being chucked out of office somehow, but he's also in physical danger. I mean, this is the part of the trajectory of being an American puppet where you can die, right? Where something very bad can happen to you suddenly. So he has reshuffled his government. And my impression of the government reshuffle is that it has two main features. One is he has increased once again the power of the eminence grise, the gray cardinal of Ukrainian politics, which is his chief advisor, officially the head of his presidential administration, a man called Andrei Yermak, an extremely vain, extremely sinister, extremely destructive personality. Some people in Ukraine dare say that he's actually more powerful than Zelensky now, but most people don't actually dare say anything about him because he's so dangerous. He's an extremely dangerous man. Yes, the big one. Yeah. Now, here's the thing. He has reshuffled the administration or his government to please Yermak, but he has also reshuffled in a way that could please the Americans. So there's a way in which you could think Zelensky is basically signaling, I know you're after me. I know you're after my skin, but I'm still your man. I'm still submitting to you. I still want to please you, right? But on the other hand, he went after the anti-corruption agencies. And once again, forget the pretense about Russia. That's really a move against the West. So to me, that was a double move, and it happened essentially at the same time for a reason. He was signaling to the West, I do want to play ball. Please keep me as your puppet. Please don't kill me. But on the other hand, if you try to get rid of me, I will fight. I'm entrenching myself, right? I'm not just giving up. Now, here's the question. What does the West want? What does USA want? One interpretation is, and that's the interpretation of Seymour Hersh, and it's plausible as far as it goes. If they destroy Zelensky, then they want to destroy him so that they can finally make a deal with Putin. So here the idea is get out of the way, get Zelensky out of the way. He's the obstacle. Install somebody else in his place in Ukraine. Make sure that this new Ukrainian leader goes along with an American deal with the Russians over and with Ukraine. Okay, that's Seymour Hersh's guess. There is another scenario, unfortunately, and I think it's as likely, which is it could be that they want to get rid of him to continue the war, not to end it, to continue it. But it could be that they feel they need a different type of leader to continue the war now. And if that is the case, then they will look for somebody who will follow those orders. Now, the man most talked about as a possible replacement for Zelensky in either scenario is a man called Valery Zaluzhny, General Zaluzhny. Yes. He's currently the ambassador in London. That's basically exile for him because Zaluzhny and Zelensky are very old enemies. They can't stand each other. And Zaluzhny was demoted from being actually the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces to being an ambassador in London. He's absolutely bad at that. Precisely so he was out of the way. He was basically eliminated as a political competitor. He's very, very popular in Ukraine. His popularity rating, I don't know why, is higher than that of Zelensky. And of course, there are now rumors that Zaluzhny is somebody who could be brought in if Zelensky is destroyed by the West. These are sort of the possibilities I see, but I can't predict what exactly is going to happen. That's beyond me.
And Zaluzhny definitely has more military background, who could be more added value for such a scenario if they want to escalate it or continue the war, let's say, in Ukraine, right?
You see, the interesting thing is it might be that he's good for both, for ending or for continuing. You're right about how his aura, his reputation as a soldier, which I don't think is entirely deserved, could be used to continue the war. But you could also see a scenario where Zaluzhny becomes the president and is then used to sell the defeat. As you know, we end this war with honor, right? We end this war with honor. I'm telling you this, Zaluzhny, right? That sort of thing. There's an interesting interview with Zaluzhny, which he gave years ago to The Economist. And there's a line in that interview that I have never forgotten. And there he says, I'm not yet in the position in which Mannerheim was in Finland when he had to agree to stop the war.
Hmm.
So, right, this
Wow.
is about a military leader when
Yeah.
they fought against the Soviets, who actually, after a heroic fight, has to agree to stop the war, so to speak, with honor, right? That would be the scenario. The other thing I want to say about Zelensky, because I've seen the comment, somebody wrote that he's a hardcore Banderite. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. He is a hardcore Banderite. Does this mean he would never be ready to shelve the war for a while? I don't know. That depends. But ideologically, he's an extremely nasty piece of work, right? But then again, there are more of that in Ukraine. There are a lot of that, actually.
And also the question is, would the Russians agree to sit with someone like Zelensky?
There you have to be very careful, because Russia's current position is to say we want to denazify Ukraine, as they say. Okay, I get that. But the other position is that they don't want to sit with Zelensky because Zelensky doesn't have a mandate. It's a constitutional reason. It's a legal reason. And Putin has talked a lot about this in detail in interviews. I think he takes this very seriously. And here's another twist. At the same time, even the Russians right now are saying, we are not going to have a meeting Putin-Zelensky, but not because we will never meet him. That's not what they're saying. Not even with Zelensky. They're saying because that meeting could only happen when the peace has been basically finished. That's their position. So you have to see that the Russians are not, even for Zelensky, the Russians are not totally ruling out meeting him. That's not true. That's not true. There's an interview with Zelensky where he sits together with Zarubny or whatever in a car, and they talk about all of this. And Putin literally says to this Russian journalist, look, I mean, the legal questions, there's always a way you can solve this if you want to. Remember, Putin was trained as a lawyer initially, right? So the Russian position is very sophisticated. It's not that simple. They're not simply saying we can never talk to Zelensky. They're saying we cannot talk to him now. And it's true. I'm sure they would like not to have to talk to him. With somebody like Zelensky, if Zelensky became president and accepted a peace deal that makes sense for the Russians, I personally can see the Russians saying, okay, if you have officially a legal mandate, good enough for us. If you give us the peace we want.
I think that is the case too. The Russians would not mind sitting. They're rational. They would sit with him. Tarik, I also wanted to ask you about an article this week published on Time, and this is where Giorgia Meloni is leading Europe. And this is a long article, guys, published on Time. And I summarized this article, or took some key takeaways. So I just want to, Tarik, if you allow me to read a little bit of takeaways from this article, and then we comment. Nearly 3 years into office, Meloni has emerged as one of Europe's most influential and intriguing leaders, combining populist nationalism with pragmatic commitment to Western alliances and the EU. Despite her party's far-right roots, she has embraced NATO, backed Ukraine, distanced Italy from China's Belt and Road Initiative, and maintained close working relations with the US and EU leaders such as Biden, Ursula von der Leyen, and J.D. Vance. Meloni positions her stance as rejecting global homogenization, instead promoting a nationalism focused on defending Italy's identity, culture, and heritage at all costs. She sees such nationalism as compatible with European and transatlantic unity, pro-Western, yet rooted in a populist nativist ideology. Though initially moderating some campaign promises, for example, shelving a full naval blockade, Meloni later shifted rightwards, consolidating executive power, controlling media and judiciary, limiting protests, and tightening immigration policies. Critics warn her governance show incremental steps towards illiberalism, warning that her style echoes broader trends among rising right-wing leaders in Europe. Meloni's upbringing as working-class single mother from Garbatella without a college degree shaped her resilience and political determination. She joined Italy's post-fascist youth movement at 15, rose rapidly in politics, served as Minister for Youth under Berlusconi, founded Brothers of Italy in 2012, and led the Party of Victory in 2022, becoming Italy's first female prime minister. In Washington, Meloni delivered a carefully prepared message to President Trump, securing respect through her direct style. He is a fighter, and I'm a fighter, she said. She has won accolades globally, including the Atlantic Council's Global Citizen Award and recognition in Time 100 and Forbes listings, reflecting her ascent as global political figure. Finally, what are the concerns of her critics? Critics question whether she is drifting further right, consolidating power in ways that threaten media freedom and democratic checks, a pattern similar to authoritarian trends in other European countries. Although Meloni disavows fascism and anti-Semitism, figures in her party still express nostalgia for Mussolini's legacy. Scholars caution that accommodating such elements risks eroding liberal democratic values. Tarik, when you follow Giorgia Meloni, do you see also like agree with me that she changed after she came to power from more a populist personality into becoming more mainstreamish personality, especially that she wants to align herself more with the Trump administration? She was close with Elon Musk and she left the Belt and Road Initiative. There was something that has changed in Meloni's approach in Europe.
Yeah, I think that's clear. And, the way I personally see it is that when she came into power, she essentially dropped everything that could antagonize either the EU or other EU countries or the United States in geopolitics. This is how she's done it. She understood, and she's not at all stupid, I think. I think she's a great political talent and very smart in her way. She has understood that the way you do this is you come into power with the populism. Domestically, you can sort of do your thing, but you cannot mess geopolitically with the West. There you have to submit. And that's what she's basically done. That's what she's done.
And I think this is also what is going to happen with the AfD. Like the speech and rhetoric is something, but when they arrive to power, they will submit to more NATO geopolitical line, because that's what
Entirely
pragmatism
possible.
will force them to.
Oh, that's definitely what Maximilian Krah would do. I mean, if he's going to call the shots, that's where they're going.
I don't know if you're following what's happening on X with the right-wing scene, but it seems that Maximilian Krah has become one of the most hated figures in the AfD.
In trouble again?
He's in trouble. He's receiving lots of backlash by his own popular base.
You know what the problem with Krah is? Look, politically, I have no overlap with him anyhow, so I can look at him very neutrally, right? He's a smart guy too. He's clever, but there's a huge problem. Yes, he's very vain. So he actually shows people, he displays to them that I'm playing a trick on you because I'm so clever and you are not. And people pick up on that and they hate it. Meloni doesn't do that at all. Meloni has a much better rapport with her electorate. Much better.
You know, when I see Krah's image, especially during this last Trump election campaign, and then what happened in Germany with the elections, and this is just my opinion. I noticed a pattern, and that is many people who work as a PR for Elon Musk, they have also propped him up like on X.
Interesting.
Yeah, the people who I know that they work for Elon, they have created the image that Maximilian Krah is the Donald Trump of Germany. So this was the way they presented him, in the German public. But it was too like the PR was too clear for me to see who is leading it and how they started to repost his stuff. So he started gaining tens of thousands of followers on X. it is not natural. Look, there's so many people in Germany also as politicians think that followers on X or on Facebook means nothing, basically, because those are mostly not your voters. And they create image about people, about politicians, and present them as the Donald Trump of Germany, and the AfD is the only solution for Germany. But this is all talk. This is social media talk. When you go and knock door by door and every door in Germany and ask the people what they need, they're not on X. They're not seeing what's happening on X, right? they're checking how are they going to pay the bill, which has become now 120% more after the Ukraine war. By the way, this is the last part, Tarik. I wanted to ask you about what is the intention behind France declaring that they would like to recognize Palestine or two-state solution and recognize the Palestinian state within the 67 borders. Meanwhile, Marco Rubio criticized France. What is happening in this matter?
Look, I think Emmanuel Macron, this is his initiative, obviously, right on the French side. I think he's happy that he's getting this brutal criticism, these attacks from Rubio and from the Trumpists, because he can display himself as a martyr and as someone who touched a courageous taboo or something like that. And it's all theater. It's all, I'm sorry, I have to say it, bullshit, right? Because here's the reason. Palestine, a lot of people don't know this. I find this very strange. Palestine has already been recognized as a state by the vast majority of countries on this planet. I know a lot of people don't know this, but that's actually true. It's at least over 150 states, we have about 200 on the planet, that have recognized Palestine. Right? So the Europeans and all these states that are still having trouble with that, they're vastly behind. That's what's happening here. And the fact that the UN doesn't give Palestine a full seat is a scandal in every way, but also because actually the majority of states have recognized Palestine. So how can you not give it a seat in the General Assembly, right? And just this weirdo separate status and so on. So recognizing Palestine as a state is something that should have been done a very long time ago by everybody. Doing it now, I think, is a cheap maneuver to distract from the fact that France, like other countries in the West, is being on the side of Israel, while Israel has committed another genocide against Palestinians. And I would really not be impressed by this. I warn people against thinking that makes Macron some sort of friend of the Palestinians or hero or whatever. It's a cheap, transparent, and rather silly propaganda trick that's happening here. Now, listen, I can tell you what would not be a propaganda trick. I can tell you, right? Obviously, what every country in the world, I mean, maybe not Liechtenstein, they can't, but every country in the world with a serious military should be out there putting together an alliance, defeating Israel and saving the Palestinians from genocide. I'm not kidding. This is actually international law. This is what should be happening under the UN Genocide Prevention Convention, because it obliges the signatories to prevent and punish the crime of genocide. All of these countries have signed that document, so it means they would actually have to go in and prevent the crime, not just sit there. Instead, the countries of the West help Israel commit the crime. This is where we are, right? Now, if you ask me in less direct terms, in terms of diplomatic recognition, what would be the minimum, this is not enough, but the minimum that one could talk about? Here's the real minimum. The minimum would be 2 steps, not two countries, 2 states, 2 steps. De-recognize Israel. That's what we have to talk about. And then recognize Palestine instead of Israel. That's what we have to talk about. Nobody is talking about it. I'm very aware of that. But this is what we really need to talk about now. If somebody wants to take diplomatic steps, not military steps, which we really need, but diplomatic steps that are at least consistent and that have to do with the recognition of states, the step would be withdraw recognition from Israel officially, break off all relationships, and declare publicly that you don't recognize Israel as a state, and then declare your public recognition of Palestine if you haven't done it yet, if you're that late. That's the bare minimum. And anybody who's still talking about the two-state solution can, I will say it here, go and fuck himself. I've had it with this nonsense. I've recently seen an article by Omar Bartov, who I used to admire as a historian, and I've lost all respect for him because it's a long article in the New York Times and it goes through this endless blah, 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 a typical liberal Zionist Israeli blah, blah, about how long it's taken him, how he has been thinking about this, always centering on oneself, and then admitting, yes, it's a genocide. Thank you, Omar. The rest of us, we've known this for almost 3 years. Where have you been? And then at the end, Bartov says, well, if anything good can come out of this, is that both sides learn to live with each other. So he's saying, I've now finally understood that this is a genocide. And I, as an Israeli, I'm not saying how incredibly ashamed I am and that all of us should leave. I'm saying, oh, the best that can come out of this is that the Palestinians learn to live with us. Excuse me? I've had it with this nonsense. What Palestine needs is the de-recognition of Israel, the Israelis leaving, and those who don't leave have to live as citizens of Palestine under a Palestinian government, if it lets them, and those who have committed crimes against Palestinians should face Palestinian courts. I know this is very far from our reality. I understand. But that's actually the normal, logical, reasonable position.
Are you talking about your compass, Tarik? I totally get you. And the thing is, there are so many scholars, also like Chomsky. I remember in 2013, I think 2013, I attended graduation ceremony in American University of Beirut, and I was shocked. He was present and he gave a speech and he said in 1948 he went to honeymoon in Israel in the kibbutzes with his wife, and I was surprised that he brought this story during a graduation ceremony. And why would he mention that? Because back then in 48, this was more controversial. Like it was the beginning of Israel, right? So I, as a conspiracy theorist myself, I was like, why would he mention this information to hundreds of basically Lebanese grads who just graduated from political science faculty, for example, and telling them about his honeymoon in 48 in Israel, basically. He didn't say Palestine, he said in Israel. So that also stuck in my the corner of my brain, as we say. And then I was disappointed by many people. For example, Norman Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein's position on Syria, it's a typical so-called liberal establishment talking point, somebody who has been watching Al Jazeera day and night. I understand I cannot ask people to become perfect on everything, but when you talk about this Palestine-Israel issue, I take notes because you have a clear compass, right, about this case. And this is why I'm trying to bring other examples that so many scholars, they want to stay in the mainstream. And some things, yes, and some things, no. It's a cherry picking for them. But what can we do? We're not here to change the entire world. We're here to inform those who are watching this channel about what is going on around the world. I'm very grateful to have you as a dear friend and also contributor to Syriana Analysis and this show, Cold War 2.0. And thank you so much, Tarik. And thank you so much for everyone who watched this stream, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great weekend. Before leaving this stream, the nice thing to do is to just hit the like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel. And I will see you on Monday. Tarik, have also a great weekend. Peace be upon you, upon your families.
Same to you.
And thank you so much with Access. Really, I really appreciate your moderation of the live chat. See you guys. Salam.